Trade policy in the U.S. has taken a turn toward uncertainty. China and other countries are threatening retaliation against proposed tariffs. Meanwhile, NAFTA negotiations with Canada and Mexico continue with no clear end in sight. How does all this talk on trade weigh on Nebraska agriculture and other businesses? That's what we'll discuss today on Speaking of Nebraska. Welcome to Speaking of Nebraska. I'm Grant Gerlach. We're here to talk about some of the important issues facing our state. That includes an update on the Nebraska legislature as the unicameral enters the home stretch of this year's session. And we'll look back at the history of an important link in Nebraska's railroad industry. But first, a look at how Nebraska fits into the national conversation on trade. Next month, negotiators from Canada, Mexico, and the United States will get together again to discuss changes to the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. Now, it's no secret President Donald Trump thinks NAFTA is a bad deal for the U.S., but it's generally been a good deal for the agriculture industry, which factors so heavily in Nebraska's economy. In fact, Canada and Mexico are the state's top two export customers. They buy a lot of beef and a lot of corn, among other things. So you can bet that Nebraska farmers and ranchers will be paying attention as negotiators get back together. I recently visited a few of them to get their thoughts on NAFTA talks. Alan Tiemann farms corn and soybeans in eastern Nebraska, but like many farmers, when it comes to his business, he keeps a global perspective.
95% of the world's population lives outside the U.S. So it's a huge factor in that, we're not just producing for ourselves, we're producing for the world.
Exports are a necessity, Tiemann says, and America's two closest neighbors are big clients. Canada is a top destination for prepared foods and fresh produce. Mexico is the #1 export market for corn, $2.6 billion worth in 2017. But where does that leave farmers? What do you do with all that grain if NAFTA falls through?
If NAFTA falls through, that's just a scary thought. Up to like 1/3 of my income comes from exports. So NAFTA plays a huge part in that, and they're the largest trading partner we have. We need trade.
For farmers, exports are an outlet for the extra grain raised in the United States. Without trade, there would be an oversupply, and the prices farmers earn for their crops would fall. In the beef industry, trade has become part of a border-blurring multinational production system.
When you process one of these animals, it doesn't go the same place. You have pieces that go everywhere, okay?
Craig Uden operates Dar Feedlot in central Nebraska, where cattle put on weight before they go to market. Meat companies sell cuts of beef where they bring the best prices. Steaks and hamburgers do well in grocery stores and restaurants in the U.S., but other cuts sell better overseas.
The tongues maybe go to Japan, okay? And the oxtail maybe goes to Europe.
NAFTA is part of how this works. Cattle from Mexico and Canada are often imported, tariff-free, to feedlots and packing plants in the U.S. From there, they become part of the beef supply parceled out on the export market. Just as corn farmers fear an oversupply if NAFTA were terminated, Uden fears the U.S. would be saddled with more beef than Americans could eat.
And once it's disruptive to the livestock sector, particularly in Nebraska, then it presses back down to the grain markets and the hay markets and the ethanol production.
That's what Uden worries about if NAFTA goes away. But there are some in the cattle business who believe NAFTA has already done more harm than good. David Wright operates a ranch in north central Nebraska where he raises calves that eventually grow up to go to feedlots. Wright agrees with President Trump that the current version of NAFTA doesn't work and supports efforts to reform it. His argument sounds like the recent debates over steel and solar panels. He says cheap cattle from Canada and Mexico undercut his business.
The cost of living or production in other countries is different than it is here. So as long as we're one of the highest economies in the world, I don't see a lot of advantage in us trading for something that we already produce.
Last year, the U.S. exported nearly $2 billion of beef to Canada and Mexico, but also imported millions of cattle from the two countries. Wright says those animals compete for space at feedlots.
Someone tell me how that's good for the producer here who's paying the real estate taxes to keep the school open, you know, doing business trying to keep the town open, as opposed to the guy in Canada who's really not.
According to a Department of Agriculture census, the number of large cattle feedlots has declined by more than 50% since the agreement was signed. Wright fears if NAFTA remains unchanged, that trend will continue.
If anything, they've kept us in the game.
Craig Uden doesn't think there are fewer cattle producers in the U.S. because of Canada and Mexico. He blames the cost of labor and keeping up with environmental rules. The direction NAFTA turns under the Trump administration is not the only issue on farmers and ranchers' minds. Some 60% of rural voters went for Trump in 2016, and that includes many farmers like Alan Tiemann, who says he's been happy with the tax cuts that were passed and regulations that have been rolled back. But NAFTA cuts straight to the bottom line of his business.
If we go in there putting tariffs and different things on all these products moving back and forth between the borders, who's going to pay for that? The consumer's going to pay for that.
Dave Wright has been encouraged by economic growth and new jobs created so far under Trump. He says putting protections in NAFTA for American workers and cattle ranchers would reinforce that.
I need the consumer to have money in his pocket so he can purchase my beef that's put out for market. And if we're sending jobs over to other countries, then what are our citizenry doing to earn a living? Because if they don't have revenue to spend on the product that I'm trying to sell, then I guess I don't have a product to sell. You know.
Wright hopes cattle are part of the conversation as NAFTA talks continue, while other farmers like Tiemann hope to avoid the crossfire as the Trump administration pushes for changes in trade. Now joining me to talk more about how the debate over trade policy is impacting Nebraska business is Bruce Boyer of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. Bruce, thanks for being on Speaking of Nebraska with us.
Oh, you bet. Great to be here with you.
We just heard from some farmers with different perspectives on NAFTA. Tell me, what do you think NAFTA means to business in Nebraska and even beyond agriculture?
Well, it means a great deal. It's one of the reasons why we penned an editorial in the Omaha paper probably about 2 months ago. My boss, Wendy Birdsall, and David Brown from the Omaha Chamber penned an editorial talking about the importance from the agriculture perspective, but also from the manufacturing perspective. According to a report from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we have about 90,000 jobs here in Nebraska that depend on NAFTA.
Just from the business done through that trade agreement.
Exactly. And Canada and Mexico are our two largest trading partners. Back to your question about just the perspective from agriculture's point of view, we share that. That certainly flows through all the economy, but manufacturing is a very important part of Nebraska's economy too, and that's another consideration that we have. Manufacturing jobs are very important, and NAFTA supports those as well.
So we heard from farmers saying that they're concerned about losing exports if NAFTA were significantly rolled back for some reason. Other businesses you talked to, what would they say about the potential impact of significant changes to that NAFTA agreement?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They would talk. I mean, the manufacturers are the same concern that the agriculture sector has, both from a perspective of goods that they send out and also maybe some that they bring into the country. I had an earlier discussion just this week with a manufacturer here in Lincoln that everybody's familiar with, Kawasaki. It wasn't particularly about NAFTA, but just the general topic of trade, and really about the issue that was in the news recently about steel tariffs and the impact that it's going to have on them.
These are tariffs that have been proposed on imported steel and aluminum, and it's meant to protect the domestic steel and aluminum industry.
Yes.
But you're saying domestic manufacturers could also face impacts from that. Like what? What were they talking?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They will face impacts because even though those tariffs will be paid, then the market will go up. And that was an interesting conversation that I had with the plant manager out at Kawasaki, just informing me that they're used to fairly large fluctuations in the steel market, but the impact that it'll have will definitely be significant. They'll probably be able to manage through it, but you know, you multiply that by all the other manufacturers that's going to impact across this state, across this country. It's a big concern, and I think it's, you know, just something that's thrown quite a few people, you know, off kilter a little bit, because usually we don't talk about trade and have these types of discussions in quite the manner that we're having them right now. Yeah.
What do you mean? Is trade not usually as big a news as it has been?
Well, it's not usually. I mean, usually this is sort of done in a, I guess I would say, diplomatic way, and people don't really hear much about it. You know, NAFTA is 23 years old. We would agree that you should probably modernize it, but just some of the, I think, what they say in foreign policy is saber rattling. Some of the saber rattling, if you can use that term applied to trade pacts, that's going on. I don't think we're used to having that type of language used in this country. And, you know, we were talking earlier about how important relationship building is in any business, but trade, I mean, that's really very important. So I think a lot of our trading partners are probably needing to be reassured right now that, you know, things aren't quite as maybe drastic as you might think, and, you know, just to hold tight with us.
But they are fairly unsettled
Yeah.
in terms of which countries will end up on the list of tariffs for steel and aluminum. What kind of tariffs could go forward against China that have been proposed, and where will NAFTA land?
Yeah.
These negotiations have already been going on for quite some time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a very good point, and I think, you know, the good news is I think it's fairly consensus position that we need to maintain free trade. We need to be careful about these conversations. It's very good news that our representatives, senators from Nebraska and congressmen from Nebraska are all free trade advocates and are on our side, both agriculture and business sector.
I'm wondering how you know, the discussion at the federal level with tariffs and free trade agreements, how does it impact the kind of work you try to do at the local and state level to build the kinds of relationships that you're talking about?
Well, I think it really just encourages us to redouble our efforts. You know, when there's an opportunity to go on a trade mission, we're usually there, somebody through our LPED division, which is the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development, building those relationships, so we won't miss opportunities. We hardly ever do. But I think it's probably in some ways a good thing, just to kind of remind us all, let's make sure we really make an effort to build those relationships. You know, there's I think it's a Midwest U.S.-Japan trade conference that's going to be in Omaha. This is the 50th year of this conference happening. It rotates back and forth. And I think we'll probably see a pretty good crowd there this year. I think it's building up, you know, 50th year is a milestone type of celebration anyway, but I think even with all this that we're talking about here today, it would just accelerate the interest in it, in making sure those connections and making sure those relationships are solidified. So in some ways, it's a good thing that this is kind of happening right now, just to kind of reinforce the idea that you really do have to maintain and build those relationships.
On those trade missions, what happens? Who do you talk to?
Yeah.
And what actually happens when you're there? Are you literally signing deals?
Yeah.
While you're
well, I've never attended a trade mission. That's usually my boss at the chamber or somebody from our LPED office. But from what they say, you know, it's a lot of exchange of touring businesses, the businesses that go along on the trade mission, having an opportunity a lot of times to meet the right contacts within, a lot of time it's the government within those countries, and just making those contacts with government officials for their products or companies for those products. And just, it can be as simple as an exchange of a few comments at a dinner party, and certainly the exchange of your contact information that can lead to, future business between the two individuals.
With all the conversation and debate going on about trade, even maybe saber rattling, do deals go on just sort of ignoring that as background noise, or does it potentially have a real impact on whether something moves forward or the timing of things moving forward?
I would guess that deals still do go on, just because most of the individuals and companies that are involved in international trade understand and probably have cultivated a very long-term relationship. And so I would guess that there probably is quite a few still, a continuation of a lot of the deals and a lot of reassuring of partners in other, contexts for your international trade efforts. And again, kind of back to my earlier comments, I have not talked to anybody about this or, confirmed this, but I would think in some ways this environment right now might even have a silver lining, if you will, that just kind of having the effect of bolstering the idea that you should always kind of keep cultivating and building those relationships.
How do you look at the idea of deficits and needing to, the idea that we need to fix trade deficits and balance our trade? What does that mean for a state like Nebraska?
Well, I think you do have to be concerned about trade deficits. I think all of these trade pacts that we have and NAFTA and other trade agreements that we have, they should be reviewed and modernized. We should try to understand why we are, some of those deficits occur. I heard a commentary on this just the other day. Part of the reason is, we are a country, as a country, are very consumption-oriented. Other countries that we trade with may be more savings-oriented. That might be some of the explanation for why the deficit is there. Is some of the explanation that we've signed off on some agreements that really aren't as balanced toward our interest? I don't know. I mean, I certainly think that should be reviewed. But, I think that gives a lot of people across this country pause and concern to say, we support free trade, but we would certainly like to have that balance be, rebalanced a little bit.
As we wrap up here, what is the message that your chamber would send to elected officials, and do you believe they're hearing it when it comes to how to move forward with these trade policies?
Yeah, I absolutely know that our elected officials are hearing it. They are sounding the same message that we have on trade, and that is essentially, in a nutshell, be cautious. Be very careful about these. I mean, yes, we want to improve our trade agreements, but we do not want to damage these trading partners and the relationships that we have with them.
Bruce Boyer, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Here are some stories NET News is working on. New University of Nebraska-Lincoln research shows male and female economists see things differently when it comes to regulations and government intervention in market economies. Brandon McDermott sits down with one of the lead researchers at UNL to discuss the findings. Mike Tobias is looking into Nebraska job trends. What's hot, what's not? We'll hear about the impact automation is having on the workforce, the future of retail jobs, and preparing for a changing workplace. And we'll hear about a program in the federal farm bill aimed at training minority and veteran farmers. The Trump administration has proposed cutting funding from that program. Harvest Public Media explains why that could make things particularly tough for young black farmers. Listen for all of our signature stories on NET Radio or at netnebraska.org/news. Also connect with NET News and our journalists on Facebook and Twitter. This week, lawmakers gave second-round approval to the state budget by a vote of 44-4. That's after coming to a compromise over federal Title X family planning funds to organizations that refer for or perform abortions. The compromise allows groups that receive Title X to refer women for abortions in cases of emergency. That leaves just a couple weeks for the unicameral to debate a slew of other issues. NET News legislative reporter Fred Knapp sat down with State Senator Adam Moorfeld to get his perspective on the session.
Senator Adam Moorfeld, thanks for speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.
I want to talk to you about some of the specific issues you've been working on, but first let me ask you what's been your impression of the session overall so far?
Well, so far I think it's been dominated by some unnecessary budget cuts proposed by the governor. And then also it's been fairly slow, actually. Usually we have more priority bills that are out and being debated on the floor, and we have more laws that are being passed.
You talked about unnecessary budget cuts. At the time he made his proposal, that was before the Forecast Board had increased its estimate of incoming state revenues. Looks now like the legislature is going to pass a budget that cuts most state agencies 2% this year and 2% next year, higher education 1% next year. Mm-hmm. What's your view of that outcome, if that is in fact what happens?
Well, it's a much better outcome than what the governor's original budget was. So I'm happier. But that being said, I'm displeased with the fact that despite coming out of what I view as an economic recession as a state, the governor still insists on having tax cuts.
On taxes, it appears that there are 3 or 4 possible courses that the legislature could take at this point. The governor has a proposal that would give people income tax credits for a percentage of their property taxes that are paid. There's a petition drive going on that would just cut property taxes by roughly 30% and leave it up to the legislature to figure out how to pay for that. Senator Breese has a bill that would increase income taxes and cigarette taxes, pump more money into school aid and try to lower property taxes that way. And there's always the fourth option of nothing. Mm-hmm. What do you think is preferable, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think Senator Breese's proposal is preferable. I haven't heard one person tell me that they're looking for income tax relief. I've heard a lot about property tax relief, and I think we need to right the ship there. So I don't understand the governor's preoccupation with income tax, probably because it affects him the most. But that being said, I think that whatever we do with property tax relief, we need to make sure that we have the revenue to supplant it, because right now we're coming out of an economic recession, and the responsible business thing to do is to make sure that we maintain our revenues, but we reshift some of our tax burden. And right now there's too much tax burden on property taxes.
Now, one of the issues that you've consistently supported in your time in the legislature has been expanding Medicaid. Mm-hmm. It's been tried in the form of a bill 4 or 5 times. It hasn't ever overcome a filibuster. This year you proposed that the legislature put it on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. That hasn't gone anywhere. There's a petition drive that's coming up to try to put it on the ballot. Do you think that the legislature is out of touch with the people on this, or are they more in touch and this is just sort of an outlier attempt to go around the legislature and put it on?
Well, I don't just think that the legislature is out of touch with the people on this. They are out of touch, because I've seen the numbers, I've seen the polling from several different polls. And
what do those polls indicate?
The polls indicate that there's strong support for Medicaid expansion.
Majority support?
Which, definitely majority plus support. And that's why we're putting it on the ballot, because the people are far more reasonable than the legislature in making sure that health care insurance and costs stay affordable for working families. And they're currently not. And for the folks that are afraid about how we're going to pay for Medicaid expansion, we're already paying for it. We're paying for it in our ERs, we're paying it for our premiums for the folks that can afford it. And pretty soon, rural Nebraska, when they start seeing hospitals close, they're going to be paying for it too.
Other causes you've supported included legalizing medical cannabis and prohibiting employment discrimination against LGBTQ people. They haven't gotten anywhere. Are you out of step with Nebraskans, or what's going on there? Why do you think the legislature's out of step?
Well, you know, it's hard for me to say. I was elected with 68% of the vote in my district. I'm unopposed for re-election. I think that I'm in touch with my district. And I also think that I'm in touch with a lot of young Nebraskans. I represent 20,000 young Nebraskans. That's half my constituency. And when I sit down and talk to them about what kind of state they want to live in, these are the types of things that they talk about. And if we're serious about retaining and recruiting young Nebraskans, I think that we can be a little bit more forward-thinking as a state. And so when it comes to affordable health care, affordable higher education, medical marijuana, those are all things that young people look to, and when they decide whether or not they either stay in the state of Nebraska or they decide to come to the state of Nebraska. And included in that is LGBT non-discrimination. Young Nebraskans want to live in a state where people can't be married on Sunday and then fired on Monday, which happens in this state. And so I am always pushing the envelope to make it so that Nebraska remains competitive, that Nebraska remains a place where people have equal rights, and where Nebraska remains a place that people want to not only stay but come to.
The legislature is officially nonpartisan. You're elected on a ballot that doesn't indicate what party you belong to. You don't organize according to party caucuses, that sort of thing. But most people in the legislature have a party registration.
Yeah.
Yours happens to be Democrat, and I think you'd probably cop to the title of Progressive Democrat.
Absolutely.
This is generally perceived to be a conservative, Republican-dominated state. What do you see going forward?
Well, I mean, I can't predict the future just like anybody else can, but I think demographics are king, and I think that in the end, Nebraska's political dynamics will change. You know, we have a lot of younger Nebraskans that are taking political power, that are starting to become active in the political process, and I think that the views that the current majority of Nebraskans hold will moderate and change just as they always have. That being said, regardless of whether I'm more progressive or whatever the case may be than the majority of Nebraskans, I was elected to represent my constituents. I was elected to have the interests of the entire state in mind. And I was also elected to vote my conscience in the best interests of the state and the people that I represent. And I'm going to continue to do that.
Very good. Senator Moorfield, thanks very much again.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
During the session, listen to Fred's daily legislative updates on NET Radio at 5:45 and 7:45 a.m. and 5:45 p.m. and on our website at netnebraska.org/news. The world's largest rail yard is in western Nebraska. In this Nebraska History Moment, Bailey Yard and how North Platte became a critical railroad hub.
The first train rolled into a wild body railroad camp known as Hell on Wheels in 1866. Union Pacific Chief Engineer Granville Dodge cited North Platte as a division point for the railroad. It became a key hub as the railroad grew in all directions. Dodge also built major shop facilities and switching tracks to sort, fuel, and repair locomotives and ensure efficient operation of the railroad. A century later, the yard was renamed in honor of Ed Bailey, former UP president and North Platte native. Today, 14,000 cars roll through the Bailey Yard daily, making it the largest railroad yard in the world. It employs 1 in 10 North Platte residents and attracts thousands of visitors each year.
That wraps up this edition of Speaking of Nebraska. We'll be back with a new show next week to talk about the future of the death penalty. Join Bill Kelly to hear about a couple different court cases that will factor in. And Fred Knapp will have another update on the unicameral. Until then, thanks for joining us. Good night.